Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging headfirst into the high-octane world of Formula One, specifically the British Grand Prix qualifying session, Silverstone, July 5, 2025. It was quite something. We've gathered a whole stack of sources, lots of detailed insight from some excellent on-the-ground.
Absolutely not at Silverstone. Beyond the outright pace, you had several really crucial things going on. First, that notoriously unpredictable British wind. I mean, it can shift direction, strength, between corners even, makes car setup a real nightmare.
Right.
Then there was that significant 30% risk of rain hanging around, just enough to keep every single team strategist on edge. And of course, the usual Silverstone challenge, traffic management, especially in Q1 on such a long lap, trying to get a clean run. It's chaos. These technical bits, they often play as big a role, maybe even bigger than just who has the fastest car on paper.
And speaking of the cars, Aston Martin turned up with some pretty significant upgrades for their AMR 25. Fernando Alonso was seen putting a new floor and upper bodywork through their paces in practice.
Yeah, he was testing that out.
Now, the word was these were aimed more at race pace, which immediately brings up that classic F1 dilemma, doesn't it? How much do you compromise your Saturday speed for Sunday performance? Especially here. It's a real balancing act.
It is. It's a huge gamble.
Yeah.
Shows a team maybe thinking long-term points, but you risk starting further back. And this session, it also felt like a really critical moment for Carlos Sainz. We'd seen his struggles, Q1 eliminations 3 weekends in a row. For a driver like him, it's almost unheard of. Huge pressure.
Immense pressure.
And Silverstone, of course, that's where he got his first F1 win just 3 years back. So it felt like a chance, maybe, for a bit of redemption. The psychological side must have been huge for him.
And as if that wasn't enough going on, we had penalties confirmed before anyone even turned a wheel in qualifying.
Right, already shaping the grid.
Kimi Antonelli was carrying a 3-place grid drop from that tangle with Max Verstappen in Austria. And OLLIE BEARMAN got hit with a really harsh 10-place penalty.
Yeah.
Pit lane crash under a red flag. Apparently 260 kilometers an hour.
Just staggering speed for the pit lane. And 4 super license points, too, which is significant.
Exactly. So those penalties were already set to shake things up quite a bit. So with all that swirling around, Q1 finally kicks off. And yeah, almost immediately, chaos. That light rain you mentioned started falling, sending everyone scrambling for an early time before it got worse. A proper race against the clock.
It was, yeah. And the first big incident came really quickly, highlighting just how tricky it was. Franco Colapinto, he spun and hit the wall pretty hard in that last corner, damaged the Alpine, brought out the first red flag. He got out okay, but yeah, it was well done. And that stoppage, it just ramps up the pressure on everyone else, doesn't it? Less time, track evolving.
It really does. And what was fascinating when it resumed was how incredibly close everyone was. We saw Oscar Piastri go fastest initially. Then Max Verstappen pops up. But Carlos Sainz, under all that pressure, he found himself properly on the bubble at one point. 15th place. Really having to fight to break that Q1 curse.
You could see him digging deep.
And he did. Pulled out a crucial late lap, got himself up to 8th, safe into Q2. Showed real character, I thought.
Definitely. And Fernando Alonso, meanwhile, just showing all that experience, wasn't he? He managed to save a crucial set of soft tires for later. That's smart driving in those conditions, having fresh rubber in your back pocket.
Very clever.
So at the end of Q1, the drivers knocked out were Liam Lawson, Gabriel Bortoleto, Lance Stroll, Nico Hülkenberg, and obviously Colapinto. And Lewis Hamilton, wow, that was a close call for the home crowd, wasn't it? Qualified 14th. A fuel issue on his last lap, apparently, nearly put him out.
Just shows how quickly things can go wrong, even for him.
Right.
Okay, moving into Q2 then. The intensity, you could feel it just ratchet up another notch. Max Verstappen predictably set a strong early benchmark.
Yeah.
But then, this was amazing, Oscar Piastri matched him.
Exactly.
To the thousandth of a second.
Incredible. Just absolute identical times. What does that even tell you about the level they're operating at?
Mind-boggling precision.
And then Lando Norris just edged them both out, took provisional P1. At one point, the top 3 were separated by just, 85 thousandths? Shows how competitive it was.
Insanely close.
And it does make you ask, how much of that is just pure driver skill, squeezing every last bit out, versus the actual car performance when it's that tight?
That's a great point. Maybe those tricky conditions sort of leveled the playing field a bit, made the driver difference even more critical. And strategically, Ferrari played an interesting hand too.
They did, yeah.
Came out initially on used tires, kind of feeling things out, then bang, fresh softs on, straight to P1 and P2. Both Alonso and Sainz were looking good at that point inside the top 10. Looked like they'd found something.
They certainly looked promising for a moment there. But ultimately, for Carlos Sainz, just heartbreaking, really, after fighting so hard to break that Q1 run, to then get knocked out of Q2 by, what was it, 0.035 seconds?
Oh, tiny. Less than a blink.
That's the kind of margin that just kills you. Pierre Gasly found time, Kimi and Antonelli found time right at the end, and suddenly Sainz was pushed down to 11th. Just missed out.
Gutting for him.
He was pretty pragmatic afterwards, though, said the team just didn't quite have the ultimate pace for Q3, especially with others bringing big upgrades. And he did mention again that he often feels his car is better in race trim, maybe hinting at that setup compromise we talked about.
Yeah, a really tough pill to swallow, breaking the Q1 curse only to miss Q3 by a whisker.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Fernando Alonso just keeps delivering, doesn't he? Made it to Q3 again, 5th time in 6 weekends.
Incredible consistency, and that maintained his dominant qualifying record against Stroll. 24 Lando now, I think. Remarkable stuff.
So the final shootout, Q3, all eyes on the battle for pole, and on that first run, Oscar Piastri. Wow. He absolutely detonated the timing screen.
He really did.
A blistering 1.24.995. That wasn't just fast, it felt like a statement. Put 2/10 on Lando, 3/10 on Max.
Huge margin at that stage.
We even heard him on the radio asking the team to check the floor afterwards. Like, he almost couldn't believe how good the lap was.
That was a properly stunning lap. Then Lewis Hamilton, cue the roar from the Silverstone crowd, slots into second, just 0.135 seconds behind Piastri. Suddenly you're thinking, could he do it? A home pole.
The hope was definitely there.
And Alonso, yeah, his lap was a bit slower than his Q2 time, but still provisionally P7, solid. But the tension was just immense for those final runs.
But just as the clock ticked down, Max Verstappen, who, let's remember, hadn't topped any practice sessions all weekend. He just delivered what, well, the report's called a stratospheric final lap. It was something else.
It really, really was. Pulled out an incredible 1.24.892. Just found that extra gear when it mattered most. Snatched pole by a 10th. Over Piastri and Norris. It was just a classic Verstappen demonstration, wasn't it? Never, ever count him out.
Never.
George Russell put it fourth. Good lap from him. Hamilton ended up 5th. Leclerc 6th. And Alonso ultimately qualified 9th. But yeah, that pole lap for Max was stunning.
So after all that drama, what were the drivers saying? What's the feeling now the dust has settled?
Well, Max Verstappen acknowledged how tough it was, especially with that variable wind through Q1, Q2, Q3. Called Silverstone a great circuit, said the car was fast on the straights, but a real challenge in the high-speed stuff. It felt like a big push for the team to nail it. You know, highlights that constant engineering challenge.
Yeah, finding that balance. And Oscar Piastri, obviously gutted to lose pole by so little, but he seemed pretty satisfied with that amazing first lap. He said something like, small things are what make you go up or down. Talking about those hundredths of a second. Sums it up perfectly.
It does. And Lando Norris echoed that, didn't he? Said he couldn't be unhappy with third, but obviously wished he was higher. Expecting a fun and good battle tomorrow. You can feel that competitive spirit, knowing how close they all were. Fernando Alonso admitted it had been a, quote, weird weekend for performance. Wasn't even sure Q3 was on the cards. But the really crucial bit from him, I thought, was acknowledging the team was maybe going a bit backward this season. But, and this is key, he said it was expected because they're putting everything for the 2026 car.
Wow, that's a big statement. A long-term play.
Huge strategic insight there. Sacrificing now for later. And Carlos Sainz, yeah, disappointed but realistic, said they just didn't have the pace for Q3 compared to the upgrades others brought. And again, hinted he feels better about his race pace.
So after all of that, and factoring in those penalties we talked about ages ago, the final grid for the British Grand Prix looks like this. Max Verstappen on pole, Oscar Piastri alongside him in second, Lando Norris third. That is a seriously mouth-watering front three rows. George Russell starts fourth, Lewis Hamilton fifth, Charles Leclerc sixth.
And crucially, those penalties really did shuffle the pack further down. Fernando Alonso jumps up to a very strong 7th-place start, thanks to Antonelli's drop and Bearman's big penalty. Carlos Sainz also gains a spot. He'll start 10th.
Okay.
And it's worth remembering, isn't it? Silverstone has seen 4 different pole sitters in the last 5 years. It underlines just how unpredictable this place can be. It's not a track that guarantees anything.
Definitely not, which sets us up for what everyone seems to think will be a really fun race. Talk of very equal pace among those top contenders. That possibility of rain still lingers for Sunday. And with the margins being so incredibly tight in qualifying, honestly, anything could happen. Lights out tomorrow, 16.00 local time. Can't wait.
So thinking about the bigger picture then, what does all this really mean for tomorrow's race and maybe for the season moving forward? Well, if you zoom out a bit, I think this Silverstone qualifying just perfectly highlights the incredible pressure, the absolutely razor-thin margins at the top of F1 right now. We saw it time and again, didn't we? A single tenth, a tiny mistake, a strategic gamble, it can completely change everything for a driver's weekend. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? In a sport that's so incredibly reliant on technology, on constant upgrades, billions spent on development, how much does that raw, innate driver talent, like that stratospheric lap from Verstappen when it mattered most, how much does that still dictate the final outcome? Is the driver still the ultimate difference maker, or is the car always king in the end?
That is a fantastic question. Something for all of you to ponder as you get ready for what should be an absolutely epic race tomorrow. And that wraps up our deep dive for today into that fascinating British Grand Prix qualifying session. We hope you feel a bit more informed, maybe saw things from a slightly different angle, and are definitely hyped for the main event. If you enjoyed digging into this with us, please do make sure you follow us wherever you get your audio. That way you won't miss our next exploration